Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss pre-market video for Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. I am Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. The previous session here finishing with a massive high range day, over 400 points of range, over 400 points of range yesterday. That was 454.5 points of range, which eclipsed the range from Friday's session, which was just, quote unquote, just 361 points. So more range on Monday. Much of that range came by way of headline that came out, which ended up not being quite correct here, which snapped prices back. And in that impulse move, these markets created a tremendous key range on an intraday basis. The ES, NQ, YM, RTY all creating super large intraday key ranges yesterday. Not quite the entire width of the day's range, but the ES goes to about 48.50 and change up to the high of the day. That whole thing right there is an impulse move and a key range, and that kept prices in check the rest of the day yesterday. But one thing we mentioned yesterday was this could be an early entry opportunity here for scaling in purposes on long-term entry opportunities, those big time stocks that you've been wanting to get in on. We've talked about this in our trading room as well. And of course, even if there are more lows to come, that could be a scaling in approach here for a longer term return. This has been a tremendous drop. We've dropped right to major market structure levels that we've talked about here as well. Long-term levels here, like this 4,800 level here, which goes back as the top of prior market structure. So big time here how that's played out. If you go down to about 3,600 right there, that's about a 1,200 point range right here. If you go 1,200 points up, that takes you to 6,000, so it's a little bit more than that here. But we've had a big pullback here, and if you look at the longer term weekly chart, we might be right on the line where this thing could start to develop some strong lows for a long-term reversal. Now, from an intraday perspective here today, a little bit bullish here. Again, when you have such reactions to tariff headlines, you're going to get a lot of back and forth strokes. But one of the things we mentioned yesterday afternoon in our afternoon trading session here is that large range yesterday could keep prices mostly in check today as a high range inside day. So we could be looking at a high range inside day today, already 133 points of range, already showing some strength, and there is the potential here to come test an edge at some point later today. If we do get to the edge, do we fade back down a bit into today's range, or is there an ability here to kind of push higher through the top of that high? That would be significant for a strong low. So let's take a look here at the NQ now. Again, very similar price action here. The previous session with an impulse rally and drop, giving us a large key range on an intraday basis. Again, the key range shares the high here, but the low somewhere closer to about 16. What is that? 16,680. Somewhere in that zone. That's about the low of the key range. So it's most of the day's range yesterday. Yesterday's range was 1,900 points. 1,900 points of range. And this is what we've been talking about for several weeks and even a couple of months now. When are we going to get that capitulation point? When are we going to get that strong low? It looks like Friday into Monday, we're starting to see those initial signs of that capitulation / strong low develop. And we've taken out some significant areas of support back to major market structure levels, as we've mentioned here, holding 17K. Can we start to make some sort of bounce back, even in the near term here? Some sort of reaction rally. So today, again, positive headlines as this thing moves higher a little bit. Still not out of the weeds here, obviously, but at the same time a bit more bullish in the very short term. Today, very likely could be an inside day, again with a high range inside day. So it's already fairly high range, 417 points, which is just 57% of ADR, which is wild. But that right there could lead to a little bit more strength here and then keep prices mostly in check within that key range. If we take a look here at crude oil, this one's up nearly 0.9% right now. This one dropped below 60 for the first time in 4 years, something like this. Here's your $60 level right there, dipped below it. Yesterday in the pre-market video, I mentioned we might be finding an impulse low soon, and if we do, there could be a snapback that gives us a great key range. At the moment, we got the impulse move, not quite the strong low we'd like to see, but a strong low could still develop, or perhaps if we bounce back to that midpoint, it would essentially create a strong low. So 65.62 is that target to give us a new key range here. $60, big time level there. This market has been allergic to prices below 65, below 66, especially 64 for the last 4 years. So this could be a spot here where a bounce occurs into 65.63 at some point, giving us, or 65.62 to give us a great key range. That key range would be about 13 plus points in size, and that could give us the next major directional target. For example, if we break to the upside here, plus 13 gets us 85s down the way. So, or minus 13, do we drop down and start to go into the 40s? So that large key range could keep prices in check and eventually give us a long-term target. All right, let's take a look here at, let's go gold futures right now. This one up 1.8% right now, a massive day. 1.8% here, but it's had a huge 3-day drop, and that's something we mentioned to begin the month. So last Tuesday, I mentioned right there, best case scenario would be an impulse sell-off that allows a new key range to potentially develop. That key range could keep prices in check for a development at these highs. That would help to digest recent price action, and would also help to build energy for the forthcoming move as well. Very similar to how that played out there, but this is a longer form pullback here, so you have a bigger, wider range. So 3,200 here, 2970 right there. That's what is that? 230 point range. 230 points would put you to 3430 to the upside. 3430 would be that upside target, and of course, right there, 3432.80. That would be the upside target if price can find that midpoint relatively soon, right? The midpoint's going to be right here around 30.80 or so, right in that zone. If we don't find it soon and we keep dropping, you got to find that strong low and find that key range midpoint when it does develop. So good pullback here for gold. That doesn't break the trend. That doesn't break the market structure. It's basically a potential buy the dip opportunity here that could be in play. Of course, we did auction down pretty hard, but that was an aggressive multi-day stretch. But still maintaining market structure, which is impressive. Still maintaining the trend overall, and if we get that midpoint, we have ourselves a new key range. Looking at the YM, big time strong low off the 37,000 level. Big time rotation again, like the ES, this thing coming back to major market structure highs from before. Big time bounce here, super massive high range day. Again, Friday was a massive sell off, 2,400 points of range. Yesterday, 2,700 points of range. So 300 points more of range on a Monday here, and already a high range inside day developing. Although this one stretched pretty close to the previous session's high. That's going to be something to keep an eye on to see how it responds to that high. Does it keep prices inside that key range for the rest of the day? Again, a significant discount overall in the YM, and that's what made yesterday so important and this bounce so important here. This could be a scaling approach here that helps buy into opportunities that could develop into significant recoveries down the road. Now this long big time high range impulse move down could finally get its midpoint here. If that's the case, we have ourselves a massive key range here in the YM. That key range would be about 6,100 points in size, which would be significant here for long-term directional conviction here. So massive key range could give us major long-term targets. And again, while this is a really good day one strong low for scaling in, it may not ultimately be the low, but it's a great initial opportunity. We might get the midpoint later on, develop, hit a lower low here, and that could trigger, you know, a broader base recovery. So we'll see how this develops here today. Again, high odds for being an high range inside day, but this one's the closest to reaching an edge. Looking at Bitcoin here, perhaps the flattest bounce that we've got is out of the crypto space here. This Bitcoin bounce here, 2%, which, you know, the ES is a 2.4% bounce right now. YM 2.9%, for example. NQ at 2.3. This one's 2.1 right now, and it's had some of the widest selling pressure, but it did bounce off that 75,000 market structure level. We've talked about 75,000 for a long while now. It's that zone right there. You can see how it was prior resistance here, and on that day, actually days before it, I said if we can pull back and find a transition day through that 74,000 market structure level, it opens up multiple targets ahead, including that 92 right here and the 100K level about right there. So we've reached those targets on that push. We've now come all the way back to that level right there, hitting the low 74,635. So again, if it can hold this level, there's a little bit of a bounce that can happen, maybe back to 90K, even if it's just range bound. But if we fail at 74.75 here, you have a shot to go back to 50 down the road with 60 along the way. So again, big time market structure right here for BTC. And to be honest, not quite looking as strong on the recovery bounce here as, say, the ES, NQ, or YM right now. ETH, even worse right now. This has been the worst performer, and right here, just a 1.7% bounce heading into the day. It's a doji day after a pretty weak reversal pattern here. It was a relatively high range day yesterday for this one, 200 points. That's a pretty significant day on an average basis, but well under what we've seen routinely here lately. So you can see yesterday was a magnitude day that was just so huge for so much of the market, yet Ethereum here wasn't really impacted that dramatically by way of range. This one took it by way of gap. So it was down, what, 16, 14, 15, 16% yesterday, and much more at various points in the day, but bounced off a significant area of support. That 14,000 level is significant. As we mentioned before, just value-wise, back to the recent market structure breakdown of 28 would be a double. Back to recent highs would be a triple here. So the long-term potential is certainly there. Do we develop some sort of accumulation pattern at these lows? That's the question here. You have VPOC right there, so we're back to value. After such a devastating move here lately, does this thing just kind of build out here for a while, build some energy, and then get going to the upside down the road? So we're going to have to keep an eye on this one here, but this is a great add back point longer term, or it could be a great initial scale in point for starting a new position. So again, great spot here, but do we get 1,000 down the road? Perhaps, but that's why, again, this is a scaling in zone. It could scale in later and continue to build a position. This is for longer term potential down the road, but again, tremendous area of support here around that 1400 level, but we're stuck at VPOC and could be range bound for a while in Ethereum. All right, that's it for now. We'll see how this plays out as we head into the rest of the week. Remember, CPI data, PPI data later this week will be big. All right, take care. I'll see you in the trading room.